Kelly, a single mother, trudged wearily through the dark, empty streets, her baby cradled tightly in her arms after a long day of work and picking him up from the caregiver's house. The night felt endless, every shadow twisting with unease. Then, a sudden roar shattered the silence. A bright orange car skidded around the corner, tires screaming against the asphalt. Before she could react, Jerome leapt from the vehicle, grabbing her arm with ruthless force and yanking her toward the car. Kelly's heart slammed in her chest as terror surged through her veins. She screamed, her cries echoing into the deserted night, but there was no one to hear her desperate plea. Each second stretched painfully, her tears mingling with the helpless panic that gripped her. Then, from the darkness, Nancy appeared, moving with the lethal precision of someone trained to act before fear could take hold. She had been just a few meters away, heading to Kelly's house, when the screams pierced her ears. In an instant, she was there, yanking Kelly from Jerome's grip, shielding her and the baby from danger. Relief should have washed over her, but it didn't. What she saw next froze her blood, a shock so profound it stole her breath and left her heart hammering. What secret did Jerome hold, and why would it shake Nancy to her core? The answers would unravel everything, but before we dive deeper, take a moment to subscribe to the channel. Now, let's uncover how this story truly began. The streetlights along Elm Avenue flickered sporadically, their feeble glow casting fractured, angular shadows over the cracked, uneven pavement. Each flicker revealed the peeling paint on the street signs, the rusted edges of parked vehicles, and the silent stretch of sidewalk stretching ahead. It was 9:15 p.m., and the humid air clung to Kelly's skin, pressing against her in a suffocating weight. She gripped the stroller with white-knuckled intensity, her fingers trembling from exhaustion and the lingering phantom of adrenaline she didn't realize she had been holding back. Every small creak of the wheels on the uneven asphalt resonated like a ticking metronome, punctuated by the soft, intermittent coos of 6-month-old Leo nestled safely inside the padded carrier. Kelly's eyelids flickered, momentarily drooping under the strain of 12-hour double shifts at the diner and the subsequent walk to the babysitter's house. Her body ached, her shoulders hunched, every muscle fatigued, but the need to reach home, to cradle her son in the safety of familiar walls, propelled her forward. She barely registered the distant hum of the street until it tore itself apart in a sudden, shrill mechanical roar. The sound was metallic, electric, cutting through the humid night like a scalpel. An orange Supra, its body gleaming under the broken streetlights, appeared around the corner in a burst of calculated chaos. Tires screamed, rubber melted against the asphalt, sending a pungent odor of burning compound into the night. The vehicle executed a near-impossible drift, the rear fishtailing dangerously close to the curb, effectively hemming Kelly against the edge of the pavement. Before the car had fully decelerated, the passenger door swung open with a practiced speed that betrayed years of impatience and entitlement. Jerome stepped out, the weight of a thick gold chain around his neck swinging slightly with his forward momentum. His eyes twitched against the edge of the table, a subtle manifestation of nervous compliance. They're not just investors, he stammered, the words halting, measured. His head dipped slightly, a micronod of submission betraying awareness of his own expendability. Sterling Pharmaceuticals. They're operatives. They want Leo's DNA. To control inheritance, the trust funds inheritance outcomes. She observed the faint scratches, a laminated directory and subtle wear patterns on storage equipment, indicating repeated handling of a particular category of specimens. The implications crystallized instantly. Sterling's interest was precise, strategic, and coldly methodical. The infant, Leo, represented not merely a child but a genetic key to access a tightly controlled trust fund and family fortune. The pregnancy of Kelly had been manipulated without her informed consent. The procedures, performed under legal, but deceptive pretenses, a sophisticated intersection of medical authority, corporate power, and legal obfuscation. Nancy's eyes narrowed as she traced the trajectory of influence from clinic protocols to operational exploitation. Every micro-expression Jerome had exhibited now made sense. Reluctance, subservience, and subtle attempts to regain composure in an environment designed to control behavior. The variables were clear: he was expendable, the infant was critical, and Kelly remained unaware of the orchestration surrounding her. Nancy's jaw set with controlled resolve. Every movement, every observation, and every analytic calculation informed the tactical blueprint she would employ to protect the child and dismantle the operational hierarchy endangering them. Her gaze swept the sterile yet deceptive interior one final time, committing spatial coordinates, personnel behaviors, and procedural anomalies to memory. This intelligence, coupled with her operational assessment of Jerome and the network orchestrating events from the shadows, provided the foundation for the strategic decisions to follow. Nancy's body remained cold in quiet readiness, eyes sharp, mind precise, the embodiment of a professional who understood that the lives at stake required exacting, methodical, and lethal efficiency if necessary. The architecture of the threat had been exposed, and she now held the blueprint for intervention. Nancy's engine hummed low and precise. She maneuvered through the narrow, winding roads leading to the cabin, each turn calculated for speed and cover. Her eyes, sharp and methodical, scanned for anomalies along the tree-lined path, shadows that didn't belong, the glint of metal, movement inconsistent with night wildlife. Her jaw tightened imperceptibly as she pressed a hand briefly against the wheel, knuckles whitening with the subtle exertion of controlled force, a micro-expression betraying anticipation rather than fear. Her mind ran through tactical probabilities in microseconds, points of ingress, potential choke points, lines of sight, and extraction vectors for both Kelly and Leo. Arriving at the cabin, Nancy assessed the perimeter in a fluid sequence of observations. Windows reflected faint light, doors bore scuff marks consistent with forced entry attempts. Her breath remained even, measured, yet the slight flare of her nostrils indicated sensory prioritization, olfactory cues of fresh oil from door hinges, faint human sweat, and the metallic tang of blood from a minor scrape in the surrounding underbrush. She pressed herself against the side wall, scanning both the immediate approach and potential flanking routes, tracking invisible lines of movement like a seasoned tactician, anticipating the flow of engagement. She entered the cabin swiftly, voice controlled but urgent. "Kelly, intruders, two armed, now." Kelly's eyes widened, pupils dilated, lips parting in a shallow exhale, a micro-expression of instinctive fear overridden by training acquired in maternal vigilance. Her hands tightened on the stroller, wrists flexing, fingers pressing into the padded handles. Leo stirred briefly, a soft whimper, sensing the rapid shift in energy. Nancy's hand steadied Kelly's arm, a firm but brief pressure transmitting direction and reassurance. The cabin erupted into orchestrated chaos. Two men, precise in their approach, breached the entrance with calculated efficiency. Their movements were synchronized, fluid, and controlled. Each step measured, weight distributed evenly, hands gripping compact firearms with professional readiness. Nancy's eyes caught the subtle ticks that betrayed training, minimal micro-adjustments of their grit, slight shifts in stance to maintain center of mass, rapid but controlled eye movements scanning for cover and potential targets. This was not amateur intrusion. These were professionals, private military contractors contracted for extraction, with mission parameters likely focused solely on the infant. Nancy's internal analysis accelerated. Every visual cue, every auditory signature, the faint click of safety switches, the metallic scrape of tactical boots against hardwood, the controlled exhalation from respirators was processed and catalogued instantly. Her own body moved in response, fluid, economical, coiling into motion designed to maximize protection while minimizing exposure. She guided Kelly and Leo toward the cellar, her hand at the small of Kelly's back, subtly redirecting weight, ensuring every step maintained balance and stealth. Descending the narrow stairs, Nancy scanned for environmental hazards, noting the proximity of support beams, the reflective surface of a low-hanging pipe, the potential for improvisational defense or concealment. She calibrated her breathing, keeping it controlled to avoid auditory detection while maintaining cardiovascular readiness for immediate engagement. Kelly followed, micro-shifts in posture betraying both compliance and heightened maternal vigilance. Leo's soft coo ceased, replaced by the faint friction of padded cover against the stroller, a signal Nancy registered in the periphery of awareness. The intruder's presence was perceptible even without direct sight. The subtle disturbance of dust, faint vibrations through the floorboards, and the low, calculated hum of conversation carried over secure radio channels. Nancy's mind aligned the data, triangulating positions, identifying likely lines of advance, and anticipating their next vector of engagement. She noted the professionals' approach patterns, deliberate, systematic, with micropauses indicating decision-making algorithms consistent with private military contractor protocols. Nancy recognized the operational imperative. She could not rely on law enforcement. Any civilian response would be too slow, too predictable. The situation demanded an operator. Her training, her instincts, and her capacity to act with surgical precision were the only viable path to secure Kellyanne Leo. Her hand rested lightly on the concealed weapon, thumb subtly adjusting the safety. Muscles cold and ready for instantaneous execution. Each micro-movement was calculated to maintain readiness, to protect the vulnerable, and to respond with lethal efficiency, if necessary. As she positioned herself in the cellar doorway, eyes sweeping the faint light filtering through cracks above, Nancy's pulse remained steady, her mind a matrix of tactical contingencies. The professionals above were unaware of her exact positioning, their confidence a variable she would exploit. Every micro-expression, every slight exhale, and every environmental cue informed her next move. She was no longer just a sister, she was the operator, the guardian, and the decisive force between life and death in the room above. Nancy activated her secure comms, the device small and discreet, calibrated for encrypted transmission. Her thumb pressed with deliberate precision against a tactile keypad, feeling the subtle detents beneath each pad. She ran a silent scan of ambient frequencies to ensure the line would not be intercepted. The hum of electronics filled the space only in her peripheral awareness. Her attention remained on the operational picture unfolding around Kellyanne Leo. The faint crease of her brow and the micro-tightening of her jaw betrayed the internal calculation of risks and contingencies. But her breathing remained shallow, controlled, each inhale measured to maintain a steady mental and physiological state. "Miller," she said, voice low, controlled, edged with the authority of someone accustomed to decisions that carried lethal consequences. Her eyes scanned the shadows around her, cataloging potential entry points, escape routes, and reflective surfaces that could betray movement. She noted microsignals in the comms feedback, static bursts indicating line integrity, minor latency that suggested external interference, and subtle frequency modulation that could reveal attempts at eavesdropping. Every detail informed her tactical evaluation. The response was immediate, clipped, professional. "Nancy." Miller's voice carried through with calm authority, each syllable weighted with experience and knowledge of operational constraints. "Sterling is not just a corporate target, he has political connections, private security liaisons, and influence that extends into legal enforcement channels. Any direct intervention could flag you as rogue. Your extraction vectors must consider both tactical and jurisdictional consequences." Miller's words were precise, each phrase a calibration of risk, conveying both warning and situational awareness. Nancy absorbed the information with minimal physical reaction, though her eyes narrowed slightly, nostrils flaring ever so subtly, as her mind parsed potential interpretations of the threat matrix. Her gaze flicked to the perimeter of the cabin in her mind's eye, overlaying Miller's intelligence on her own reconnaissance. Each shadow, each reflection, each spatial anomaly was cross-referenced against the capabilities and probable locations of Sterling's operatives. Her jaw flexed subtly as she weighed the calculus, legal constraints versus operational necessity, political influence versus tactical advantage, and the human variable Kellyanne Leo whose safety remained the overriding objective. Nancy's fingers flexed against the comm device, a micro-tick revealing the engagement of both cognitive and motor faculties in tandem. She replayed Jerome's confession in her mind, the operative's training, Sterling Pharmaceuticals' methodology, and the covert extraction plans. Every variable coalesced into a single operational priority: protect the child and neutralize the immediate threat. The constraints Miller had outlined were acknowledged but did not alter her course. They merely informed the risk mitigation strategy. "Understood," she said finally, voice calm yet carrying the subtle edge of iron resolve. She released the comms, tucking the device into an inner pocket where it could be retrieved if necessary. Her eyes scanned the immediate environment again, micro-adjusting stance, shoulders shifting imperceptibly to distribute weight evenly and maintain readiness. Each breath, each subtle movement, reinforced the quiet professionalism that defined her operational approach. Nancy's decision crystallized with deliberate clarity. Sterling's game was as much political and corporate as it was tactical. He wielded influence designed to manipulate legality and perception, but the tactical advantage remained with her. Every procedural action, from reconnaissance to engagement planning, had positioned her to exploit environmental and human factors. The control of space, the understanding of enemy behavior, and the ability to manipulate micro-moments were all assets that Sterling's influence could not negate. Her eyes scanned the room once more, noting every potential obstruction, every reflective surface, every line of fire or concealment. The subtle twitch in her left eye reflected the cognitive load of processing multiple threat vectors simultaneously. Her hand flexed, adjusting the concealed weapon at her side, while her lips pressed together in a micro-expression of determination. Kelly's and Leo's safety was now inseparable from the operational calculus. There could be no compromise, no hesitation. Nancy exhaled softly, the sound controlled, deliberate, releasing only the minimum necessary oxygen to maintain physiological stability, while maximizing mental acuity. The betrayal inherent in Sterling's manipulation, the use of legal and corporate power to coerce and endanger, fueled a quiet, resolute focus. She would act independently, guided by principle, training, and the tactical advantage that she had cultivated over decades. Every micro-expression, every movement, every breath was in service of that singular mission, the protection of her family against a calculated, powerful, and ruthless adversary. Nancy approached the abandoned ironworks with the methodical precision of a seasoned operator. The structure loomed like a skeletal relic, beams rusted, windows shattered, yet it offered an ideal environment for controlled engagement. Every entry point, every support column, and every patch of cover was catalogued in her mind with microsecond efficiency. Her eyes flicked across the environment, analyzing sightlines, angles of approach, and probable choke points. Each step she took was deliberate, the solace of her boots pressing lightly against the fractured concrete, creating minimal acoustic signature. Her breathing was shallow and regulated, chest rising in controlled increments as she scanned for environmental hazards and potential threats. Jerome, seated on a reinforced crate, shifted uneasily. The subtle flex of his fingers against his knees, the twitch of his eyelid, the slight downward tilt of his head all betrayed the mental calculus of compliance and fear. Nancy observed him with precision, noting the micro-expressions that revealed residual anxiety and the instinctual assessment of danger. His role was clear, a messenger coerced into operational compliance, a conduit through which the enemy would be drawn into her controlled engagement zone. She applied a light pressure to his shoulder, a tactile cue to maintain posture and attention, the steel in her gaze transmitting authority without words. With meticulous preparation, Nancy established the kill box. Smoke generators were positioned to obscure vision at predetermined intervals, flares marked precise zones of engagement, and tripwires attached to non-lethal triggers provided real-time feedback of enemy movement. She mapped escape routes for non-combatants, ensured suppression lines were clear, and mentally rehearsed sequences of movement and engagement. Each element was chosen not only for tactical efficiency, but also to control the psychological battlefield, forcing the intruders into predictable vectors without giving them the initiative. When Jerome made the call to Sterling, his voice careful and measured, Nancy's ears registered every nuance. The micro-pauses, the shifts in tone, the subtle inflections all indicated both coercion and the successful transmission of the intended lure. She monitored his body language as well, the tightening of his jaw, the minimal exhale through pressed lips, the slight retraction of his shoulders confirming that he was under duress but executing the task effectively. Every micro-movement was a signal she integrated into her operational awareness. The first wave of mercenaries arrived, entering the ironworks with professional cadence. Each footfall was calculated, their stance controlled, shoulders square, eyes scanning in disciplined sweeps. Nancy noted the subtle adjustments in their grips, the brief micro-ticks of head and eye movements that betrayed assessment and anticipation of contact. Using the smoke and fire as visual and olfactory disruption, she isolated each operative in the kill box, channeling them into zones where tactical advantage favored her. The interplay of light, shadow, and particulate matter transformed the environment into her instrument, each column and beam a controlled variable in the engagement. When contact was initiated, Nancy moved with lethal efficiency. Her CQB training allowed her to neutralize targets with minimal wasted motion, precise joint manipulation, controlled takedowns, and immediate reassessment of threat vectors after each engagement. Micro-expressions in the mercenary's faces: the brief whitening of eyes, the twitch of a hand reaching for a weapon, the sharp inhale before exhalation were registered and acted upon instantly. Each neutralization was surgical, eliminating the threat without compromising her positional advantage or the safety of non-combatants. Her tactical awareness extended beyond the immediate physical environment. Every sound, metallic scrape, footfall, inhalation through respirator was analyzed for origin, intent, and potential threat. Smoke and fire were not only visual obfuscation, but auditory and olfactory distortion, interfering with the enemy's cognitive processing. Nancy used the environment to manipulate perception, forcing decision-making under duress and exploiting the human instinct for threat prioritization. Minutes stretched in controlled, high adrenaline focus. Each operative was accounted for, neutralized, or forced into containment within the parameters she had established. Jerome remained under supervision, his micro-expressions shifting from panic to cautious relief as he realized the precision and control with which Nancy conducted the operation. Every step, every breath, every tactical adjustment reinforced the quiet professionalism that defined her approach. The kill box was no longer just a physical trap. It was a manifestation of operational mastery, a convergence of environmental control, human psychology, and lethal efficiency. Nancy's eyes swept the compound as Sterling and his head of security were restrained, their movements limited by reinforced cuffs secured with deliberate tension. Each micro-movement they made, the slight flinch of a shoulder, the barely perceptible twitch of a hand attempting to test restraint integrity, the shallow exhale through clenched teeth, was catalogued with meticulous attention. She adjusted her stance subtly, shifting weight to maintain control over both the environment and the individuals, every muscle calibrated for immediate response. The air was thick with the metallic tang of gun oil, residual smoke, and the faint, acrid scent of extinguished flares. Nancy's nostrils flared slightly, micro-adjusting inhalation to gather sensory data, while maintaining operational composure. Her eyes scanned the perimeter once more, noting potential secondary threats, structural anomalies, and avenues of approach, while her focus remained unbroken on Sterling and the head of security. Every micro-expression they exhibited: Jerome's subtle glances, Sterling's rigid jawline, the security chief's shallow, uneven breathing was interpreted for intent and potential deception. Nancy retrieved her smartphone with precision, fingers flexing around the device, micro-tremor suppressed by conscious motor control. The live stream interface was activated with rapid swipes, minimal latency monitored through micro-adjustments of thumb pressure and wrist angle. She framed the shot deliberately, Sterling and his head of security in center field, environmental context visible to convey both scale and control. Her eyes flicked to the reflections on nearby surfaces, verifying no blind spots compromised operational security. As the feed went live, Nancy's voice remained calm, deliberate, authoritative. Each word was enunciated clearly, weighted with the credibility of professional certainty. "This is Sterling Pharmaceuticals. This operation has been orchestrated to manipulate, coerce, and endanger human life. These individuals are responsible for the exploitation of genetic material for personal gain. The public record begins here." She monitored the feedback loop, subtle micro-cues in her peripheral vision confirming the stream was uninterrupted, the digital signal stable. Jerome, still seated under supervision, exhibited a visible shift in micro-expression, a fleeting relaxation of facial tension, the slight unhooking of fists, the brief exhale through parted lips. His shoulders, previously cold in compliance and residual fear, loosened incrementally, signaling the transition from controlled duress to active witness. He observed Nancy's methodical actions, understanding that each procedural step reinforced the legitimacy of the exposure and the protective framework surrounding him and the infant. Sterling attempted a measured response, micro-adjusting posture to convey authority, but his micro-expressions betrayed cognitive dissonance, eyes flickering to the camera, jaw muscles twitching in suppressed frustration, a rapid inhalation barely visible at the nostrils. The head of security mirrored similar involuntary cues: minute shifts in stance, micro-tremors in the hands, micro-vocalizations through clenched teeth. Nancy's trained observation catalogued each anomaly, confirming compliance and the futility of resistance. Through the live stream, Nancy exposed the intricate operational hierarchy, the network of operatives, the financial conduits, and the structural manipulation within the clinic that facilitated unethical genetic exploitation. She narrated concisely, integrating procedural terminology and operational insight to provide the audience with context, all while maintaining ocular surveillance on the restrained individuals. Every microexpression, every involuntary gesture was evidence corroborating the narrative of criminal conduct. Jerome's role transitioned from coerced participant to active witness. Subtle shifts in his posture, the loosening of his grip on residual fear, and the micro-flicker of comprehension in his eyes indicated his understanding of legal and operational leverage. Under Nancy's supervision, he provided precise factual accounts, micro-reenacting sequences of contact, procedural manipulations, and personnel behaviors for documentation. Each action, each observation, and each verbal articulation was integrated into an emergent dossier capable of dismantling Sterling's network systematically. Nancy maintained vigilance even as the operation drew toward conclusion. Her eyes scanned for residual anomalies, unexpected movements, environmental irregularities, potential escape attempts. Fingers rested lightly on the concealed weapon, thumb micro-adjusting on the safety. Breathing was controlled, diaphragm expanding and contracting with the precision of a trained operator, maintaining physiological readiness and mental acuity. By the time the feed ended, the evidence was irrefutable, the hierarchy of criminal intent exposed, and the network of exploitation fully documented. Jerome's micro-expressions had shifted from fear and uncertainty to clarity and measured resolve. Nancy's own micro-tics, a slight tightening of her jaw, the calibrated blink rate reflected satisfaction in operational completion and the validation justice served through precise, controlled, and lawful exposure of the adversary. The vindication was both procedural and personal, each detail accounted for with professional exactitude. 3 months had passed since the operation that dismantled Sterling Pharmaceuticals and exposed the network of exploitation. The environment around Kelly's home had shifted from controlled tension to cautious serenity. Nancy surveyed the perimeter with practiced attention, scanning sightlines even as she settled onto the worn wooden bench beside the cabin's small porch. Each micro-movement of her body, subtle flex of the shoulders, calibrated adjustment of hand position, the gentle rotation of her head reflected an ingrained habit of continuous situational awareness. Her eyes, though softening as they tracked Leo playing on the grass, still measured angles, distances, and potential threats in milliseconds. Kelly adjusted the blanket around Leo, the infant cooing softly, reaching toward Nancy with a tiny hand. The micro-expression on Kelly's face, relief mixing with cautious optimism, was a study in human resilience. Her eyes held a flicker of disbelief at the normalcy of the moment, lips pressing together as if restraining herself from verbalizing lingering fear. Nancy observed these subtle cues, interpreting both physiological and psychological recovery markers with the same precision she had applied to tactical operations. The cabin was secure, fortified not with overt weaponry, but with subtle environmental controls, reinforced locks, sensor alarms integrated into the landscape, and interior arrangements optimized for line-of-sight observation and rapid protective movement. Nancy's awareness encompassed all variables, the direction of sunlight, the shadowing of the surrounding trees, even the creaks and resonance of the wooden floor underfoot. Her hand occasionally brushed the concealed weapon at her hip, thumb adjusting subtly, a tactile rehearsal that maintained muscle memory while signaling readiness to her own nervous system. Leo's laughter, high-pitched and unstructured, filled the space, echoing off the porch rails and the surrounding foliage. Nancy allowed herself a micro-smile, the corners of her eyes crinkling slightly, a rare, nearly imperceptible relaxation of facial muscles that conveyed genuine warmth without compromising alertness. The soft brushing of the infant's fingers against her sleeve, the rhythmic rise and fall of his chest in calm sleep when resting, provided physiological cues that the immediate threat environment had stabilized. Kelly spoke quietly, words measured, phrasing deliberate. "I don't know how to thank you, Nancy. We owe you everything." Her micro-tics, brief downward glances, fingers fidgeting with the edge of the blanket, indicated residual emotional processing, a mixture of gratitude, vulnerability, and relief. Nancy responded not with grandiose statements, but with the calibrated micro-expressions of acknowledgement. A subtle nod, a tightened exhale through the nose, a softening of the jaw muscles. Her voice, low and controlled, carried authority tempered by familial intimacy. "My mission now is domestic," Nancy said, eyes lowering to meet Leo's gaze. The infant's tiny hand flexed against hers, grasping instinctively, a tactile affirmation that the operational success had yielded tangible protection. Her lips curved in a nearly imperceptible smile, micro-expressions of pride and satisfaction mingling with the underlying professionalism that remained a constant even in moments of peace. Her chest rose in a controlled, measured inhale, exhaling fully only when she confirmed that the environment remained secure, the variables accounted for. The cabin, the yard, the surrounding landscape all were silent witnesses to the aftermath of precise, controlled, and methodical intervention. Every subtle shift in Nancy's posture, every fractional movement of her eyes tracking horizon lines or listening for auditory anomalies, reinforced the quiet professionalism that defined her ethos. The operation had concluded, but the habits and vigilance of a seasoned Tier 1 operator persisted, a testament to the integration of skill, duty, and familial protection. As afternoon sunlight filtered through the leaves, highlighting the texture of the wooden porch and the subtle creases in Nancy's uniform shirt, the sense of closure was tangible yet measured. Justice had been served, legal reparations had redistributed Sterling's ill-gotten fortune, and the immediate threat had been neutralized. The micro-expressions of relief, pride, and vigilance coexisted, painting a tableau of resilience, protection, and enduring professional integrity. Nancy allowed herself a final, subtle exhale, fingers brushing lightly against Leo's arm, committing this calm to memory before her focus returned outward, scanning, measuring, ensuring that even in peace, protection endured. If you enjoy witnessing Nancy's quiet professionalism and precision in protecting those she loved, make sure to subscribe to the channel for more stories of tactical skill, emotional resilience, and relentless guardianship.